hello, and welcome to Hurt Less, Live More. I'm JJ, the Practical Alchemist, otherwise known as, and I'm here with Dr. Mark Goulston, as ever, psychiatrist and coach. And we have a fantastic guest today. And Mark, I'm going to let you do the proper introductions.
I'm excited, JJ, because we have as our guest, Laura Ahrens-Mele as our guest. Why I'm excited to have Laura on is she is known as the anxious achiever. She speaks all around the world. She's one of the leading authorities of being an anxious achiever because she spent her whole life being that, but obviously she didn't give into it. And we want to find out what kept you from giving into it, or if that's a daily practice. You know, if you say, Mark, I'm anxious every day, but I refuse to give into it, or I focus, or I pivot, or do something. And welcome to the show.
But yeah, we want to hear all about the anxious achiever.
What can I tell you? My whole life professionally has been really enriching and wonderful and unusual. And a lot of it, honestly, has been created to help me manage my mental health. And, you know, a lot of us, as you know, Mark and JJ, who have mental health conditions that we need to take care of all the time, or who have very different brains, right? We need to work differently, right? And when we figure out how we work the best, magic happens, right? Because we have a lot of gifts. But when we're in situations that are wrong for us and bad for our mental health, it's bad. So that has certainly been the story of my life, right? I am a really ambitious, driven, goal-oriented, box-checking kind of person, right? I've always been very, very, driven to do my best. But it took me a while to understand that part of what was driving me was anxiety. Was a fear of failure, was a fear of not being liked, was a fear of loss, and that I was living in a cycle of achievement. Anxiety powered me to achieve because the stakes felt so high. I would achieve, and then the anxiety would come back, and then I would do it again. And so there's a lot of people like me. I call us lovingly anxious achievers, and we have many, many gifts. We can be really wonderful to work with and essential parts of a team. And we can also burn ourselves out, ruin our joy, have poor mental health, and drive people around us crazy.
Yeah, I completely recognize that. And Mark, it must be so common. It's a really common condition.
Oh, it's really common. I think what our listeners and the two of us are really interested in is how you push through it, how you refuse to give into it, because a lot of our listeners are overwhelmed working women, 25 to age 50, and they're overwhelmed and they're anxious. And there's and probably on a daily basis, they think they're going to drop a ball, whether it's at home, whether it's at work. I would like to say in their marriage, but what I'm learning is a lot of marriages, that's the least priority. I got to keep my job and my kids, I feel this connection to, and hubby is roadkill.
Poor hubby.
I was just going to say, what a shame.
Well, if I'm a 46-year-old working woman, mother of three, with a hubby who probably feels like roadkill. I think that what manifests as an anxiety about dropping balls is usually rooted in much larger anxieties and much bigger questions. Am I a good mother? Are my children going to be okay? Now, is the world going to be okay? Can I keep earning a living to support my family? Am I personally fulfilled? Am I going to lose it all? Is my husband going to walk out on me because I'm terrible to live with? So we have a lot of big worries, and then we sort of act them out, and they manifest in everyday what my colleagues call micro stresses, even, oh God, I'm 5 minutes late for daycare pickup, or I sent that memo too quickly and it's full of typos, all the things that will gladly absorb our anxiety.
And so share with us, do you compartmentalize it, how you push through it, how you reframe it so that the anxiety doesn't become panic, and how you can push ahead and not have the anxiety overtake you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think it's really, as you know, Mark, it's skills. It's building skills and practices and muscles that work for you, right? I mean, I think that it all starts with awareness. We can't help ourselves and stop enacting if we don't have any idea that we're anxious in the first place, right? And honestly, that sounds silly, but I think many of us aren't in touch with our feelings. It's always been dangerous to be in touch with our feelings. So we're used to acting them out. We're used to drinking them away or spending them away or controlling our eating or overeating or trying to control everyone around us. That's really common. And I have such empathy for the many, many women and men in my life who use control as a way to try to not feel uncomfortable feelings. So the first step is accepting I'm anxious. I may not have control. And I have to figure out how to live with this anyway. That's really the first step, right? And then it's really about learning the practices and replacing sometimes behaviors and thoughts that aren't doing well for you.
So what I'd love to hear a bit more about are some of those practices that you found useful, but also what's going through my mind is I wonder how much the society in the US, I think there's a lot more pressure on people in the United States to achieve, to do well at university, to do well in, corporate America. There's a massive stress. Now, I'm not saying that that doesn't exist in the UK here, but I do feel it's bigger. It's a stronger drive in the US. And I wonder how much that has to do with, the anxious achievers. But also I'd love to know of some of the processes and the little practical steps that you took to be able to push through.
Yeah. Well, let me address the US versus UK question first. And Mark, would love to hear your thoughts too. I know the UK really well. I lived there for 4 years and my sisters both live there. So, and I was just there actually doing a session. So the second biggest markets for my podcast are the UK and India, which I think is really interesting. So the majority of my listeners for the Anxious Achiever podcast are in the US, but I have a big audience in the UK. It's my second biggest market. Yeah. In America, you're on your own. And the reality of being on your own in America, although of course someone like me does have a lot of privilege that I was born with, I think necessitates a lot more anxious achievement. We are on our own in this country. And that has been made very clear by looking at layoffs in the US and layoffs in Britain. They are like night and day. And so, yes, I think that's a huge factor. Our values are extremely, I think, oriented at anxious achievement. I think that is part of the founding myths of the US. And a lot of our, entrepreneurship at any cost, capitalism at any cost, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, all that. And also that we're a nation of immigrants, right? Who come here with nothing and they have to make everything, all these things. But I certainly have a lot of feedback from people in the UK and listeners and feeders. And I think it's really dependent on who you are, how you grew up, and also what you look like in the world, right? There's data that shows that people of color, women, people who don't fit into the dominant norm are more anxious at work because they face a lot of biases and expectations and demands. So it's so intersectional and multi-layered. I'm hesitant to say this is just a US thing versus a UK thing.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I wouldn't say that for a moment. Yeah.
It's very capitalistic is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very curious to explore the differences, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
What do you reckon, Mark?
Yeah, talk about capitalistic and individualistic, where, that in America, those things go hand in hand, and there's a lot of, false pride in that. And you talk to people in New York, and there's a pride in being, I'm just too busy. I'm busy. I mean, it's a badge of honor. Yeah. I'm just too busy. I don't know whether I'm coming or going, blah, 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 blah. And I think it's a little different in the UK and other countries, maybe because it's more balanced, that work-family balance doesn't give in to that entrepreneurial, go out there and you got to make it, which we often feel in America. What do you think, Maura?
Just look at our vacation policies.
Oh, yeah.
We get 10 days of vacation. You get how much?
Yeah, a lot.
A lot. I mean, I feel like that says it all, but I think it is, a lot of this stuff is rooted in capitalism. I was reading the Wall Street Journal last week, and there was an article about how, the CEO of a big company said that they expected AI to take 30% of jobs in the next 5 years. And it did occur to me that the CEO and the board and the shareholders had a choice to make. There was no law that AI is going to kill tens of thousands of jobs, right? It's a decision that can be made. And of course, in the Wall Street Journal, the decision was assumed to be, let's get rid of all these people. Let's let AI save us money for our shareholders. So again, when you live in a world where you are instantly replaceable with a piece of code, how could you not be anxious?
I have a new article. I have a new article in in Newsweek. I'm on their expert forum. It just came out, actually, and it's about how the real threat of AI is that many of the heads of technology are a little bit on the spectrum, and they can't stand excuses. They can't stand complaints. They love mankind because they can sell a lot of stuff, but they don't like people issues. And AI, I did a search on ChatGPT. What are the strengths of AI? And what it came up with is adaptable, really likes learning, polite and respectful, which are not human qualities. And a lot of the point I was making is that technology is easier to deal with if you're not good with people issues than people issues.
Well, even if you are good with people, it's easier to deal with people who don't push back. I mean, that's a bold statement, the spectrum statement, Mark. That's interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it is very interesting. And I mean, it's probably a sweeping statement to say that, a lot of people are on the spectrum, but I guess, anecdotally, people that I've come into contact with who are great with computer coding have possibly been somewhere along the spectrum, right? My brain does not handle that very well. My brain is not that way inclined.
Someone I love very dearly is on the spectrum. And so I'm here to tell you that there are many, many people with autism spectrum disorder who are not good at math or coding.
Yeah, that's true too.
I think that the issues of neurodivergence in the workforce are only going to grow, and that we all just we have to, get a lot more educated. But, I think the larger point is that we all feel like there are existential threats. And it just is our human nature, of course, to feel like we're under threat. What is anxiety? It's a threat response.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So at this point, I think it's probably a good place to take a short break. Afterwards, I don't know about you, Mark, but I'd love to hear some of the processes which Maura has employed and helps other people with as well. But we'll hear more about that right after this very short break to listen to these messages from our station sponsors. Back right after this.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And you're listening to Hurt Less, Live More on UK Health Radio here with me, JJ, the Practical Alchemist, Dr. Mark Goulston, and Maura Aarons-Mealy. Maura, it's great to have you on this show. We were talking before the break about anxiety and, day-to-day anxiety in the workplace. Now, what I'd love to hear, what we'd both love to hear, and our audience would love to hear is how can you get through those anxieties and how can you dispel them?
Thanks, JJ. As I told you, I love saying JJ because my daughter is JJ.
I love that.
So we talked about awareness, right? We talked about that the essential first step is you can't change anything if you don't know what's happening. And so I would really recommend to listeners, if you're resonating with this, if you feel that anxiety is popping up more days than not, if you find your breath getting tight, your chest getting tight, your heart racing, if you feel that your sleep has changed, your appetite has changed, your ability to show up at work and focus has changed, if you walk around with a sense of dread, if you find that you're very quick to startle, all these things, please get help. Anxiety is so common. It's so common. There's great ways to treat it. And sometimes we need professional help. I have been in professional help for decades, and I credit that for the wonderful life that I have now and the mental health that I am able to enjoy most of the time. So just want to say that.
Yeah.
When you feel like you understand how anxiety is showing up for you, and I focus on the workplace, so let's use work. How anxiety is showing up for you and maybe what's causing it, right? We can treat anxiety without knowing what's causing it, but it's instructive to understand how your childhood and your background and your life experience and maybe even your genetics and your chemistry plays into it. But you don't have to run to the couch and talk about your parents every time you feel anxious at work, right, Mark?
Absolutely.
Is to have some tools that help you manage through. So say that you understand that you have a manager who is making you really, really anxious. This is an incredibly common scenario. Sometimes the mere presence of a manager makes you anxious. I've had this. Sometimes you see their name pop up in your email inbox and your body reacts. You see this person.
I've been there.
Yeah, right? You see this person's name as a threat and you're activated. Not to mention having to go on a business trip with them or be in a meeting with them or ask them for more money or a bigger title, right? What do you do? Well, you can work on this in therapy, and that might be really instructive, and I recommend it. But you can also manage your thoughts and your behaviors around the anxiety. Oftentimes when we're anxious, we act out with a behavior. And the key is to understand the behavior you're using. And what I do is, this is classic mindfulness, right? I look at it and I ask it a question. Is this serving me? And if it is, okay, behavior's fine. And if it's not, is there a way that I could alter my behavior? Right? So say that your boss makes you extremely anxious. And so what happens is when you're in a one-on-one with them, you start talking a lot. You start over explaining. You feel that you can't ask them for what you need, but if you just pile them with information and data and talk, surely they're going to believe you're really good at your job and give you what you want. Is that behavior serving me? Is there a way instead I could experiment with listening, with letting them run the meeting? And when I'm tempted to talk because they're making me feel anxious or defensive or whatever, just say to myself, we're experimenting. And maybe I'm even going to repeat back the question that they asked me. And so then you kind of look at your experiment, right? Well, how was that meeting different for me? Did I feel less anxious? Was the result different? Was my boss acting differently? Maybe I need to try something else, or maybe, wow, that worked like a charm, right? So it's really, really powerful stuff. And that's kind of an intense example, but a simple behavior change could be, this happens to be a lot. I'm really anxious about an upcoming presentation. And so I avoid it. I avoid working on it. I avoid talking about it because, oh my gosh, I'm going to mess it up. The stakes are so high. They'll never hire me back, blah, blah, blah. And so is that behavior helping me? No. What could I do? I could sit down and give myself 10 minutes and write out a plan. I like to think of externalizing your anxiety, of literally taking it out of your head and putting it on a piece of paper. The other thing when we're anxious is that we react with thoughts. I like to call these thought traps. There's many names for them. And the thing about these thoughts is they're automatic, right? We may have been doing them for decades. We may have told ourselves a story. And so our thought is instantly, for example, the boss says, I want to see you at my office at 3:30. Our thought instantly is, I'm going to get fired. This is terrible. He hates me. Then oh my gosh, I can't pay my rent. And then I'm going to lose my house and I can't find another job because the economy is terrible, right? And you just go down a spiral of catastrophizing. You're in a thought trap, right? Common anxiety reactions when we feel like imposters, when we blow things up, when we see things in black and white, right? We're just thinking our anxiety and we're not interrogating it. And so again, what you can do is sort of try to interrupt the thought trap. What I do is I say, Maura, you're catastrophizing again. I know that money makes me catastrophize because I'm super anxious about money. So if I get an email or a client decides they're not going to pay me again, or something happens that makes me anxious around money, I catastrophize. So I'll say, Maura, you're catastrophizing again. And then I interrogate my anxiety. Okay, well, just because my boss wants to meet with me, what are the odds that they're going to fire me? They gave me a great performance review just a month ago, and try replacing it, right? Classic cognitive behavioral thought replacement.
Yeah.
The last piece, though, I want to say, I've been talking a long time, is that anxiety is a body reaction sometimes. And so sometimes we can't use our thoughts because we're super anxious.
Yeah.
Right. And that happens a lot. You don't even need to get into full blown panic to just feel like your body is so anxious that you can't think. And so having some tools that work for you to calm your body and your breath, right? Getting out of that sympathetic nervous system and into the parasympathetic nervous system is really helpful. And for some people, there are breathing techniques, moving your body. Some people splash cold water on their face or listen to music to try to really just calm the body first, so then you can think.
I love that. And I loved when you were talking about interrogating your anxiety. It made me think of the work of Byron Katie.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true? If you have a thought that's worrying you, just interrogate it. Is that true? Are you sure that that's true?
Yeah. There's a wonderful psychologist named Angela Neal Barnett at Kent State University in the US, and she calls it the so what chorus. She's a singer, and she uses music in anxiety. And so she applies the so what. So your boss is going to yell at you. So what? Oh, You're going to feel terrible about yourself. So what? Right.
Yeah.
And then you just play it out. It's the same idea. It's,
It
creating
is.
that chain, the thought chain. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love it. What do you reckon, Mark?
I love what you're saying, and I'm making note of it. And there's some people in my family, I'm going to recommend it, and you'll send me the video, JJ, so I can show it to them.
Okay.
I have a slightly different approach, which is I do a similar thing, but I have something called the Dead Mentors Club. I have 8 mentors. They've all died. The last one was Larry King from CNN, and before him was a fellow named Warren Bennis, big leadership guy. And I find it difficult. This is just me talking myself off a ledge. I can wake up any of my dead mentors, and I'm a frequent guest on podcasts, and I'll wake up Larry King, and he'll say, "What, Mark? I did it again on a podcast. What did you do? You woke me up for this? Why don't you go to one of your older dead mentors? I'm not even cold yet. Larry, it'll be okay. Talk me down off this. What'd you do? Oh, I went off on tangents. I told stories that I didn't finish. I said, these are the 5 things you must remember, and I couldn't remember them. What do the hosts think? She wants me back.
Yeah.
Mark, you woke me up to tell me this. She wants you back. Put a sock in it already, huh? Let me go RIP. But in my mind, when I do some of those, the same questions you're asking, but I can remember people who cared about me, living or dead, a grandparent. There's something that happens because I start to be grateful to them. I miss them. I get a surge of oxytocin.
Yes. I love that. I love that. And you just reminded me of one of my favorite techniques, which is not my technique. Captain Tom Bunn, who's a master fear of flying coach and a former Pan Am captain and social worker, and he's very big on that oxytocin flooding when you're super, super anxious. And one of the techniques that he teaches for if you're scared of flying or you're claustrophobic, right, when that panic starts to rise, is to see your sister, a dear friend, what I would do, because I would have to fly all the time when my babies were little, and I hate flying, and I was so anxious, is I would see my baby and imagine holding my baby in my arms. You can think of your dog. You can think of your lover. You can, whatever. And the oxytocin floods you and calms your body. Yeah.
I want to add something more. And when you think of your children, you can think about how much you love them, but think about the part of them that's saying to you, it's okay, Mom.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay for you to travel. You do this to help with our family. Yeah, I'll have a tantrum, when you leave, when you get back, I'll be a little bit fussy, but Mom, it's okay. And I would add that to your inventory.
Love that. For sure. I would love that.
And then when you're thinking about that person or that thing that you love, I do this with people sometimes, think of something that you really, really love. Like for me, it would be a baby elephant or a kitten or a puppy or something like that, or your children, your babies, and then just, hold that feeling, picture that in your mind, and then just make it even more real. Just feel those feelings even more, ramp it up, feel see the colors brighter, hear what you're hearing even more clearly, and just really enter into that feeling totally. And it's amazing what a difference that makes.
Without oversharing, I have to interject this, which is probably oversharing, but maybe your audience will appreciate it, which is that that oxytocin summoning is such a well-practiced skill for me that I have a phantom letdown of milk, even though I haven't nursed in a long time. My youngest kid is 8, because I see that baby and I imagine holding her and nursing her, and then my body from years past thinks it's time to nurse, and the oxytocin floods and I can feel it. How crazy is that? Just now it happened.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Something similar to that I'll do with women and men, but men don't have that experience of
Right.
giving birth to a living entity that continues to bond with you, and in a few months starts to make eye contact, and you're just bonded to this child like nobody's business. But I use the word utter delight.
Mm-hmm.
That when you can look at someone and or bathe them in utter delight, there's something about it that your ego goes away. You just feel utter delight. And when some men say to me, so what is that? How do you practice that? I say, it wouldn't work with a parakeet or a snake, but if you have a dog or a cat, but especially a dog, you look into that dog's eyes, there is utter delight going back and forward. And one of the reasons a dog is a man's best friend is as men get older, very few people enjoy them.
Gosh.
And what I tell the men, you might want to try to be more enjoyable. You could work on that. And what happens is, but your dog enjoys you, and you enjoy your dog. And we've always had miniature dachshunds, and my wife says, I can't believe how much Tilly really loves you.
oh.
Well, men are getting the bum rap on this show today. Our husbands are roadkill and they're not enjoyable. And oh my God.
Yeah. And it's all coming from the man. Have you noticed that? Yeah.
No, I think there's an epidemic. I have another column coming up called the 7-Year Itch 2.0. And the idea is that when a wife becomes a mom and she's working, holding on to her job, bonding with her child is an experience she never could imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Men often feel like they're annoying. It's epidemic. And then in the 7-Year Itch 2.0 is if you feel really annoyed at home and everything you do is wrong, and I see it rampant, maybe it's just Los Angeles. I watch with my grandchildren and on the t-ball court with the mothers and fathers. I can see how men, when they're on a business trip with a client, with a colleague, with an associate, if they're a lawyer, and that person, let's say a woman, looks at you like, oh, you can't do anything wrong, and you go home and everything you do is wrong. There's a little temptation there.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I think we'll have another break so that can sink in. We'll be back with more after this from our station sponsors.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And you're listening to Hurt Less, Live More here on UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio station. I'm JJ, the Practical Alchemist, and I still am with Dr. Mark Goulston and Maura Aarons-Mealy. And we're talking about anxiety. And I think you wanted to talk a little bit more about what that is, Mark.
Actually, I wanted to pontificate.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, JJ says you're so good at that. Well, it's nice to know I did something right. But I have this idea about depression and anxiety and tell me if you can track with this or you think it's way off. I think people frequently who get depressed, what happens is they have an expectation that they were counting on too much and they didn't have a backup plan because they don't think that way. And when the expectation doesn't work out, they plummet because they were counting on it too much.
Mm-hmm.
And often they can't pull themselves out, and often they don't have a backup plan. They don't have a BATNA, best alternative to, not getting your way. And And a lot of people I know who are depressed, there's a triggering event, something they were expecting didn't happen. And if that's true, I think anxiety is having an expectation of something in the future and worrying, if it doesn't work out, what am I going to do? And so being re-traumatized by all the times you plummeted in the past. And if you're thinking about something, maybe this goes along with the so what thing more, is that, but if this doesn't work out, I don't know what I'm going to do. And the point is, what I would say to people is, I'll tell you what's going to happen if you don't make it worse. You're going to get smarter, stronger, and more resilient, much more than if it worked out. And if you use it to get smarter, stronger, and more resilient, you're going to become so mentally strong and resilient, you can handle anything. So does that make any sense about expectations, that if you know that you can handle any expectation, oh, I didn't get the raise. Oh, I got laid off. Oh, I was worried about it. But if you know internally that you can handle it, and that's when things like that have happened to me, I call upon my dead mentors. I mean, they talk me through it. What happened? So is it the end of the world, Mark? No, I guess not. It just hurts so much.
Right.
I just feel so embarrassed. So does any of that make any sense? Because I'm going to stop pontificating right there.
I mean, I think if you look at a lot of trauma therapy, right? I mean, that's a principle of it, which is that, a smaller, unrelated triggering event brings back the trauma, even if it's unrelated, right? You hear a firecracker go off and you are brought back to wartime, right? There's a classic example. And you can't control the fact that there are firecrackers on the 4th of July and that cars backfire. So you can control how you respond to it. And again, it's in the response and what you do after that. I do think that what you're describing, your dead mentors, is a skill that probably happens as you get older. I think for younger people, that's really hard. You don't have the life experience. You don't have the examples to call on. Oh, well, the other time that I lost my job, yeah, it was okay. You just don't have that. So things feel much more catastrophic, right? And actually anxiety decreases as you get older. And I think that's a big reason why. So I guess I would say yes, but I also think that it's about the scale of the upset, and that, if you're dealing with anxiety sparked by a really traumatic event, that it's much harder and needs to be taken with a lot more care. What do you think, JJ?
Yeah, I think you might be right. And it brings me back to the work of not just Byron Katie, but the idea that the only time where you actually have any power or control is in the now, is in the present.
Yeah.
And so, that interrogating of your anxiety is really for everybody, not just for people with more life experience. It's a great tool because it stops you from fixating over a possible that you don't even know is going to happen yet. So, that questioning of Byron Katie's, is that true? Can you be sure that that's true? And the more that you ask, you finally get to the point where you say, oh yeah, no, that's probably nonsense. And it calms you down. And in the present, then you can make a decision or do whatever you want to do from a place of full power, without being tainted by these anxieties and these worries. So yes, I think that you're right. I think that for younger people without the life experience, I think they need something, just a fix, an easy fix that they can go to and say, oh yeah, okay, I'll ask the questions here. Is this really going to happen? How do I know this is going to happen? And it does bring you down. I mean, I've done that on myself so many times, and it does bring you back to a place of calm.
It does.
Yeah.
Or you need to be able to go to a mentor or a friend. I mean, that's why I think having intergenerational relationships is so important, because I can't tell you, I have I have women mentors who are successful career women with children who are 10, 20 years older than me. And so I come to them with my like panic of the day about my 13 or 14-year-old. And they're like, look, look at my kids, so I think that's also really helpful.
It is. Yeah, it is. It is really helpful. And it's always helpful to have somebody you can talk to, and just airing that anxiety is also useful. Yeah.
Yes.
There's something I would add to it and mix in there. But again, I'm coming from the emo side of the tracks, and I was a suicide prevention specialist, and nobody killed themselves in 35 years. What I found was really helpful is and you can ask yourself this, so you can be younger. You can ask yourself, how much does this hurt?
Yeah.
If you're afraid, how afraid are you? So you get the emotion out. So you can feel felt with yourself, and then you can go, is it true?
Yeah.
Yes.
But I found with my suicidal patients that when I was clinical, checking boxes, and they'd smile politely and be non-compliant, I had to dive into how much does it hurt?
Yeah.
And when does it hurt so much you don't know if you can make it through it? And then when they share that, I don't do a bait and switch to, well, this is what we're going to do, is I let it breathe when they're sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it will naturally shift from that space into, well, let's think about what we could do about it. But it's like draining an abscess. You might like this more. I've been speaking about how psychic trauma is like an abscess in your psyche.
Mm-hmm.
And you can suture an abscess to make it through, a crisis, first responder. But if you suture an abscess without draining it, you're going to get septic.
Right.
So sooner or later, I was thinking of writing a book that nobody would buy called The Abreaction Cure. And abreaction is an old term, and it means feeling repressed feelings and expressing them to someone. So I'm just adding that, but I love what you're saying.
I think that that's so important, and I'm so glad you brought that up. I think it's really important is to, and getting outside of trauma, even if it's, again, back to me and my anxious boss and all of that. I'm feeling scared to go into this conversation. I'm feeling anxious to go into this conversation, and sitting with it is really helpful. Yeah,
it is really helpful. And one of the things, of course, that we are always talking about on this show is feeling into your feelings, because it's so important to do so, rather than run away from them and drown them.
Can I use that quote in a little LinkedIn I'm writing? Feeling into your feelings.
Yeah,
totally.
Absolutely.
I love it. Yeah.
So that's key, I think. Running away from feelings is not helpful. But then how do people cope? That's the thing. People find it very difficult to cope with overwhelming feelings, overwhelming anxieties. So it's all these little helpful tips that can help switch somebody from feeling almost paralyzed by anxiety, which some people are paralyzed by anxieties and fears.
I have been many times.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have been too, especially doing things like you mentioned, giving talks and speeches and that sort of thing. When you're having to present yourself in front of a large group of people who are going to be judging you, marking you up or down in terms of how you perform, all that sort of stuff. That's scary. And that it's why public speaking is probably one of is it the most feared life event? Or is it second? One of the two.
Is it that high? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, look, Toastmasters says that, but Toastmasters is selling speaking. Something I want to share with both of you, and a friend of mine wrote a wonderful book, Anxiety RX. He should be on your podcast. And he was on that show in the UK, Feel Better, Live More. And what he says is that the body holds the score. When you have anxiety, it goes into one of your organs and it stays there forever. And one of the exercises you can do is if your left hand is the mommy, the warm mommy, and the left hand is saying, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. And you put that over that organ. And the right hand is the daddy you always wanted saying to your mommy that you always wanted in you, I'm here too, and we're going to get through this. And if you can just feel that I'm putting my hands over my stomach right now with the left hand saying, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. Oh, good, because I can't handle it on my own. And then the dad saying, I'm here too, and we're going to get through this. It's sort of an amazing exercise.
It is. It's really, really helpful. And, we are coming close to the end of our show here. And Maura, what we usually ask of our guests is to tell us where people can get in touch with you. Tell us all about your podcast and your website and how you might work with people if they get in touch with you.
I would. And Mark, I have to say, I love that example, but as someone who had no benefit from a dad, and there are many people who don't have dads, another loving parent, another loving voice, maybe. They can get in touch with me on my website, which is mauraam.com. And LinkedIn is actually the best place to get in touch with me. If you reach out to me, send me a message, I will write back. I work with mostly organizations who are wanting to help find ways to talk more fruitfully about mental health at work and anxiety at work. This stuff is hard to talk about, especially in a workplace. And sometimes a little bit of coaching and inspiration goes a long way. But if you yourself are an anxious achiever and want to find some resources or get some help, feel free to reach out to.
Oh, thanks very much, Maura. Do you have videos and that sort of thing on your website? And where do people find your podcast?
Well, you can get your podcast, my podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. So there's so many places to listen, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. I don't have videos on my website, but I have 2 LinkedIn learning courses. One is about managing anxiety as a leader. And the other, which just came out and is going gangbusters, is about navigating perfectionism. Oh, wow. That's
a whole other topic to explore another time. But for now, Mark, I think, all that is left to say is thank you so much to Maura. I think we've both enjoyed having you on the show. You've been a great guest, don't you think, Mark?
You were wonderful because people can relate to you if they have anxiety. I think they can say, she has it, she's lived with it, she's mastered it, and she's teaching all of us how to get better. So I can't thank you. We can't thank you enough.
Oh, well, same here, Mark. I love your work, and JJ, it's great to meet you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for listening today. So do join us another time. It's time to say goodbye to Maura Aarons-Mealy and to me and Mark Goulston. But do join us another time here on UK Health Radio and Hurt Less, Live More. And remember that our shows are now uploaded onto a podcast channel near you. So wherever you listen to your podcasts, you can find us there too. But until next time, it's goodbye from me, Mark, and Maura. Goodbye.